Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dani Henderson, and I'm so excited because the beautiful person that you see before you is none other than Laura Eisenhower. Laura Eisenhower is the great-granddaughter of a former president of the United States. Laura, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be.
Yeah, it's so good to see you. Now, I just want to let people know that we swear and we're real, and we're going to be talking about things on and off planet. And so, if you haven't come to the awareness of the fact that there are other peoples from other civilizations, of course, there are in our universe, then this may not be the broadcast for you. However, if you have an open mind, a loving heart, and you question everything as we should at this moment in time, then we welcome you to stay with us and enjoy this journey. So, Laura, I'm going to go to my questions. As we discussed, we're both ADD. We need that the monitoring to keep us on track because we're both chatterboxes. And right before we came on, we were just saying about owning the fact that we're ADD and the fact that you yourself are oftentimes in your numerous videos, you process to the side. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I that's just kind of something I do. I don't want it to look like I'm not paying attention or engaged in the person that I'm talking to. But when I really start to get in the flow, sometimes I just kind of look away and I'm sort of holding space for that direct connect to come in. And it's kind of like taking me away a little bit. And it's kind of interesting because now I'm starting to look at other people in interviews. I'm like, do other people do that? And I like to call ADD attention on different dimensions as an acronym, because really we're multidimensional people, and sometimes to access certain information, I'm not fully here, but I'm grounded enough. But I think I've kind of always been like that. And there might be a little bit of shyness or nervousness too. That's a part of it where, I mean, I don't know though. I don't really feel that way, but I kind of ask myself those kind of questions. Especially if I've had like one of those weeks, or because sometimes if I'm really focused on the person I'm talking to, I end up picking up on their energetic field. So I kind of need to hold a container for myself so that what I'm bringing in is not getting too lost in how easy it is to really feel other people's energy, because I'm definitely very empathic and sensitive.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I think as the adult that you are now, you're over 30, you've obviously always processed this is how your brain naturally works. And there are so many parents, people, excuse me, people that can be watching this, that we really want them to understand your kids are not being little shits, okay? If your kids are looking this way, or if a lover, partner, boyfriend, husband, whatever, looks at you and looks away, they are processing this way. It's how their brain works. So let's have some kindness, some awareness, some openness, and less judgment. All right. That's a really good point. I'm glad that we raised that. Okay, so let me just pull up the questions. All right, so Laura, what is your first childhood memory?
Well, there's going to be just the glimpses of memories, and then the more significant ones that connect to a life-changing event. But I would say my earliest memory was definitely when I was living in England. I was born in London. I was born at home, and lived in England for about 3 years before we moved to the States. And I remember being at my grandparents' home and going up and down the staircase and just kind of like being, you know, the wild kid that I am. I remember being locked out of the house in the garden and having to take a wee wee in the garden.
A wee wee.
I was like, you know, a little awkward because I was already potty trained, but it was no big deal. But I just remember just kind of like, I'm kind of locked out and everybody's sitting in there having their tea. And I'm like, hello. And I was outside with the family dog. So that's my earliest memory. As far as significant kind of life altering memory, well, we moved to the States, and just, you know, the house we moved into, lots of strong memories with our neighbors. And I remember making a slide out of wood and sliding down it, and I had like 100 splinters in my bum. I'll never forget that. I was like, whoops. So yeah. And then just things with my, you know, parents, the first dog we got. I was in a pantomime my father directed, Babes in the Woods, where the kids wander off into the woods together and they die in each other's arms in the forest. And that was really impactful because I did that with my sister. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, or I could keep going.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you're a London girl. London girl, born and bred for the first 3 years. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and I visited off and on over the years quite a bit. And then I moved back when I was 12. And it's been a while since I've been there, and I miss it so much.
Wow. Well, as you know, it's bloody cold there. You can't rely on the weather year in, year out, day in, day out. Even, you know, it's even been known to hailstorm in August. Like, hello, very unpredictable weather, but an amazing country. And we're obviously also from there. All right. So again, this is called Growing Up Eisenhower. I want to know, and I know everybody else wants to know, when did you understand that your great-grandfather was the former president of the United States? And how did that impact your life and school?
Great question. I probably have only been asked this question twice. You being the second person. So it was a process. Starting at a very young age, I had visitations from him that I was very confused by. I recognized him. I knew he was a family member, but he was wearing his, his general, his with all the 5-star general badges.
So you saw his spirit. That's how he came to you, as a ghost, spirit, a beloved. Wow.
Yeah, wearing his, his, back when he was a general, he was wearing what he would have worn then.
Wow.
And he just was making contact with me. And I was really young. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And I was already being downloaded a lot about my mission here on Earth and sort of being prepared for this particular window period that we're in right now. And just information that I just was really almost distracted by, but I don't consider it a distraction. I considered almost everything else a distraction because I knew that this needed my full attention. And that's what made it really hard as far as being in school and that whole ADD thing where I'm just, I'm processing, I'm downloading, I'm definitely having contact with him. So his energy signature, his face, his presence was so familiar to me that as I was growing up and going to family gatherings, because, we've always spent Christmases, Thanksgivings together, had family reunions. My mom and father got a divorce when I was 4, but I mean, that's beside the point because my mom's side of the family is the Eisenhower family. So we have just, always been close. So when you're a kid and they're not going to just sit you down and just tell you everything, you're looking around, you're looking at the bookshelf, you're looking at books. And it's kind of like, okay, well, I know I'm in the Eisenhower family and here's a big, thick book about Dwight David Eisenhower and Second World War and his presidency. So I'm just sitting here connecting dots, asking questions. And as my curiosity began to blossom, that's when family members began to speak with me more about him, what kind of person he was, what kind of grandfather he was, because I had more access to my mom and aunts and uncles. And it was interesting because my Uncle David married Julie Nixon, who's Nixon's daughter. So
Stop it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I grew up with them. Yeah, they helped raise me and I was really close to them. So it was just exposure, a mixture of exposure, asking questions, and then really spending a lot of time with myself, trying to understand, okay, how did I end up in this family? And what are these messages coming through, which were more almost like heart telepathic than direct kind of messages. It was just sort of a heart transmission that was part of this preparation. So the benevolent groups or the presence of these benevolent beings, I felt were, connected to him, which I learned about later with Val Thor, the Nordics, and what we hear about with Eisenhower and contact experiences. So not too long after, when I was 9 years old, I was standing at the grocery store line and I saw a weekly world newspaper article about Eisenhower meeting with ETs. But it's a joke newspaper similar to The Onion that nobody should take seriously. And, like Bat Boy take over New York and kind of headlines, just as a joke. And I saw that one and I remember just being like totally focused on it and totally curious and absolutely knowing that there's more to the story than this being a joke. And from then I just kept my eyes and ears open. But yeah, it was more the family gatherings. I remember looking at family albums and seeing pictures of him and my grandfather, his son, visiting camps, death camps. And so when people say that stuff didn't happen, it's like, especially meeting families and having this particular, family, particularly him, just put so much attention on this and survivors of this and having a big mission to help to take this down. That was a huge part of my growing up and understanding who this man was. The spiritual connection brought it more into the galactic sort of larger picture. ET government treaties, what was that all about? His exposure to these different groups and races, and really finding the truth amidst a lot of disinformation, which has really been very, very heavy and accelerated and concentrated in this last decade of my life.
Amazing. Amazing. So just to go back briefly to the Nixons. So as people that look at the history of America, because obviously there are many other countries around the world that focus on their kind of, country's history. Not everybody knows the full history of America, nor should they, because they don't live there. And also bearing in mind that, when I asked you to do this broadcast, I had 2 subscribers and I was one of them. So what's going to happen is a different audience are going to see this broadcast that don't know about the deeply beautiful spiritual side of you and where you're going. They'll come to know that through this broadcast. But going back to the Nixons, so we know there was a President Nixon who was also the president of the United States after your grandfather, right? So how was that? I mean, how did that merging come? How come they were friends of your family?
Well, Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president, and Julie and David were close enough in age to, kind of have a little chemistry crush. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to fall in love kind of thing develop over the years as they were constantly exposed to each other. And there's so many photographs and awesome pictures. And I love David and Julie. They're incredible. Julie Nixon is one of my favorite women. And I remember at my grandfather, Eisenhower's son, John S.D. Eisenhower, when he transitioned and we went to West Point for his funeral, we were all sitting around the table, David, Julie, Ann, Mary, my mom, the whole family, cousins, sisters, and we're all going around kind of sharing stories and just memories of our time with John, Dwight's son, my grandfather. And him and I were very close. So when it was my turn, I really got to go in depth, and I was surprised they clapped and they were just like, whoa, I told them about just feeling close to Eisenhower's spirit as a child and how much he's helped me. And I didn't go, too deep, but not to get off point with your question, but I guess, yes, what I was going to say is when it came to Julie's turn, she said, this is what John and I had in common. We are both children of a president, right? Nixon's her father, John's father was Dwight. And she was just like, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. People think this is maybe glamorous or some sort of thing. And I think there is a bit of that in some presidential bloodlines, or sort of like what we see with the royal family, knowing though that this is one of the toughest positions to be in. Yeah. But the infiltration of the office of presidency and the 3-letter organizations that are connected to the grooming factor, and how the cabal, Illuminati, deep state stuff is very much pulling the strings on a lot of leaders. What I discovered about this family is it's very, very different from that. And getting to know Julie and growing up in the family, and beginning to understand that these things were happening, child trafficking, pedophilia, ritual abuse, I started to really pay attention. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I grew up in this and I don't even remember or know? And it's all come up very clean. And when I look at my memories with Julie and David, they were some of the best memories. And she's just full of love and just the most positive, sweet, wonderful, kind, beautiful person. I mean, I was blown away. And David was so much fun. He was David Monster. He would chase us around. And then recently, not that recently, but within this last decade, I'm trying to ask about Val Thor and trying to share about, some of these things. And the conversation kind of gets shifted because it's almost too much for us as a family to try and put our heads, but we have so much respect for each individual mission. The one thing that I loved is David would always bring a karaoke machine, and we would end up as a family just doing duets. I remember singing a Carpenter song with him and then singing Led Zeppelin. I'm like, I would never be prepared if somebody told me you're going to be singing Led Zeppelin to the Eisenhower family in your later years. But we have so much fun together as a family. And it's almost better to just be a family than get overwhelmed by the intensity of
the legacy, right? The global opinions. Talking of opinions, a lot of people that have ever followed or studied the legacy of your great-grandfather, President Dwight Eisenhower, you mentioned that he was very involved, and you have photographic evidence. He was very involved in the survivors and took time to visit people. Can you speak to that? What survivors are you referring to?
Well, I don't have those kind of stories as much as what I've read in books, what I've seen in articles, what I've heard in speeches, and what I saw in photographs, and what I felt in my heart, especially as a kid when, you know, we were in communication, and just some of the, I wouldn't say warnings, but some of the kind of like heads up. The warning of the military industrial complex is very much the warning also of false media, rewritten history, and just this, I wouldn't say he had a desperation, but there was a big focus on this agreement that him and I had that I would protect his legacy, not just his legacy, but lost history that could potentially be rewritten. And because he plays such a huge part in history, that our relationship and our connection would help to set the record straight about things that they've cast blame or put upon him as that's undeserved, that needs to be sorted out for us to be able to learn and grow from our history. Because if we're calling on fake memories of our past, we can't grow and evolve very easily if we have nothing to learn from, because it's all false. So we have to protect the history from being rewritten, but also understand and respect the fact that there's multiple timelines and different ways of experiencing things. But then there is legit rewriting, manipulation, and all based in a particular agenda that wants to steer the narrative in its favor for world domination and control.
Totally. And, you know, going back to that time, you're saying that your great-grandfather had an awakening, that there was complete manipulation. As a president of one of the, at the time, one of the most powerful countries in the entire world, as we knew it, he himself was manipulated. He himself was controlled. And these are some of the things that people are coming to understand. And, you know, we can have sympathy for so many people. I mean, some were just bad motherfuckers, let's face it. They were abusive. They were put in that position. They were manipulated into that position of power. There was a lot of cheating that we believe still happens to this very day across the planet, you know. And this is some of the things that, when it comes to the legacy of your great-grandfather, I personally feel and know that one of your missions here is to set the record straight, to speak about this great-grandfather. And this often happens, it skips a generation or two sometimes. And you've come here in this beautiful package, this woman, this wild, crazy, out there, speaks her mind, tells the truth, lives with love and passion for humanity. And you've been so brave, and you've been so educational, and you've been teaching us so much. And we thank you for that, Laura. We truly do.
Thank you so much.
Oh, darling. So you touched on this a little bit earlier, because again, people that, you know, oh, well, she's an Eisenhower, or she's a Nixon, or she's a this or that. Were there particular perks and privileges to being the great-granddaughter of a former president?
Well, I mean, there's some perks. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. And I don't like to look at it so much in that lens. I mean, it is what it is. Yes, he was manipulated, but I know he has a good heart. There are some things that I was concerned that he did maybe for selfish reasons. Then I realized, nope, that's not the case. And I remember just how we've connected since my childhood, that I really, really got to know him and how much he loved family. And Val Thor confirmed that Eisenhower actually inspired him to have a family because of how much he loved his family. And Val Thor is a being from Venus that Eisenhower became friends with and met with, and put on VIP status at the Pentagon for 3 years, you know, along with Nixon. And so my connection with Elena and her contact with Thorhan and Val Thor confirmed that, you know, MJ-12 signed the treaties with the Greys behind his back. So it wasn't just he was manipulated or mind controlled to do something, he was deceived and betrayed because they did things behind his back. I believe that, you know, when he was fighting the Second World War, his heart and his warrior energy and he was fully engaged. But as we know, the cabal owns both sides of war, creates that sort of war false flag necessity where a lot of lives are lost in this sort of like greater kind of ritual sacrifice, very much to destroy certain bloodlines and genetics so that we don't connect the dots with our root races and advance our DNA. Because that's the whole point of root races and unity consciousness, that we share these codes. So the genocide agendas are always to wipe those kind of things out. As far as perks, I mean, everybody in the Eisenhower family has worked hard, and the money that they have is the money that they've earned themselves. There were never any trust funds. I don't have a trust fund. Right. When I raised my kids, when I was a single parent, I mean, they'd help as much as they could, but it wasn't like, oh, it's time to give you your trust fund. No, I was on food stamps pretty much my whole adult life while still working, but just not making enough. I lived out of vehicles, and people are like, oh, well, you must have gotten ostracized. They must, and I'm like, no, I don't expect a handout, and I'm strong and I want to figure it out. But yes, if I'm in an emergency situation and my kids are in danger, yeah, I'm going to be like, oh, can you help me out here? And yes, they were always there in that, kind of way. And the same with my mom when she was a single parent. We lived in a very, very, when my parents first got divorced, it was my father who had, he was doing well in his occupation. He was a British barrister, educated at Oxford University, very intelligent man, speaks 7 languages, born in Egypt, very interesting man. And I won't go too much into him, but he provided a good life for us. My mom was very young. They got a divorce, and that's their business, of course. But when we moved to the States, it was a relatively nice house in a nice neighborhood. But when they split up, it wasn't like there was some castle or mansion for us to go to. We lived in the slums of Rochester and went to thrift stores. And literally me and my sister would walk to school. And I remember all the convenience stores had bars on the window and graffiti everywhere. And we weren't there for very long, but my mom worked her butt off. All the money she has is money she made. I've worked my butt off. And when we go to family gatherings, we all share stories. It's like, Uncle David, he's a professor. He's a teacher. They're all mostly authors too. So everything that I've noticed about family members is based in their own hard work, passion, and personal calling. Not any trust fund. And there's no judgment on people that have trust funds. That's awesome. I'm like, is there any of that kind of help hiding? When I was sort of like in a bit of a panic and there, maybe I remember my grandmother passed away. I think we each got $1,000. So we're not sitting on a lot of wealth. And that really opened my eyes, because when you look at certain bloodlines, family bloodlines in the presidential scheme, royalty or whatever, these people are sitting on billions or millions. Right. So this is a very different family as far as what one would normally see. And to experience this firsthand, because if I wasn't in this family and I were to just kind of look at it as an observer, I might think, okay, yeah, they're probably all taken care of. That's not a terrible thing, but
that's what we think. And it's so beautiful. Thank you so much for bringing us into that actual real-time world, that actual real-time life, because people out there are always like, oh, it's okay for him, it's okay for her, they're a wealthy family. And it's so smart, such small thinking. It really is such small thinking.
It is amazing. People wouldn't even believe it. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, no, people wouldn't even believe it.
Yeah. It's amazing. And thank you for being so raw and vulnerable and true, because it's such an education, because it's going to open other people's minds, those that have never heard, about you, knowing that you're out there live broadcasting yourself every flipping day on global issues and universal issues. But to have a peek inside your actual real true life, from how your parents, how your grandparents, how your great grandparents, your grandfather being the president of America, and the reality, the trickle down reality. You're setting the record straight. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
Well, I'm really glad you're asking these questions, because I think it's very difficult when people are kind of holding that projection. They might have just a prejudice, or this whole white privilege thing too. And I do understand some people's stance on why they go there, but it to me creates a bit of division, because these words are very much trigger words. We don't fully know each other's story. We don't know people's past lives. We don't know, when we look at kids that are child trafficked, when we look at genocides and Holocaust throughout history, it's multiracial. It's happened to, so we all need to just come together and heal and have mutual love and respect, and not assume that we know somebody's story or history or ancestry based in the color of their skin, or even what their family name might be. Yes. We need to take time to get to know each other and share stories to really experience true reality instead of projection reality or victim consciousness reaction reality. But yeah, even my sisters worked so hard. My sister lived in Brazil for the last 20 years, just moved to the States, was a school teacher making less than minimum wage. Wow. She married a native Brazilian. And it's just been wonderful to get to know a lot of family members. I would say that one of my aunts, well, she worked really hard as an interior decorator. She probably has, more the greater wealth, but she worked her butt up, or she worked real hard for it. So anyway, that's pretty much it. And when people really understand where Eisenhower came from as a farm boy, how his parents did not want him to go to West Point and pursue his mission. Very nervous about it, but there are stories about him like beating his head on a tree. Like he couldn't stand all that was coming through because of the level of calling that he was being asked to just participate in. I could relate because I remember being a kid and I really just wanted to I couldn't handle what was coming through, and there was no outlet. There was no way to explain it to people. And so it felt like I had a double life. And so his presence was really helpful. And we go way back, and as far as our soul past and history, but yeah, he wasn't raised in wealth at all. And there's so much misinformation. Like you'll see in his West Point yearbook, Swedish Jew, and there's nothing wrong with being Swedish or Jewish, but that's just not the truth of who he is.
Pennsylvania.
And the background is the Anabaptists. And so, and I think so the whole point is we got to be very, very careful of the information that we read, because people run wild with it, just like we're seeing with those that are open-minded still to our media without understanding how divisive and manipulative it is.
Yeah, it's the most horrendous thing. And like I say to people, listen, you want to really learn something that hasn't been messed around with, pick a book from 1932, or better still, pick a book from 1895 when Tesla was alive, before everything went down and before the big manipulations of 1897 in particular started coming in, and the whole global agenda to make the people stupid, take the advanced technology away, started to kick in, because Wikipedia is messed with. Everything out there on the internet is people are like rewriting that every day. Of course, we're madly manipulated, but just in closing on that. So you're making it very clear, darling, that on weekends and Sundays, there were no stately homes to pop off to, that there were no castles in your world.
No, I know the grandkids of Eisenhower would be invited, to attend certain things, but it's a lot different than just being a part of those families. I mean, my mom, she's been all around the world and visited with, pretty prominent people. Not to say that they're benevolent, but the level of compartmentalization makes it very difficult, because you can be invited to a party and have no idea what's going on behind closed doors or what these family lines are really about. They try and cover it up with the best of their ability. They'll kill people to keep these things secret, as they are involved in human sacrifice and ritual abuse. So it was very obvious that none of my family members had anything to do with that. But because, if you're a part of an Eisenhower bloodline, there's going to be certain events that take place that would need, on a public relations or a public facade level, to be like, oh, we'll stay connected to the Eisenhowers, because in the historical books, people consider him a hero. So they're going to have to carry that facade. And yes, he is very much a hero. There's a lot of heroes, but he said very openly, I'm not the hero. All these men that lost their lives in this war are the real heroes. Yes. And he did all he could. So he's very heroic in his own way. And he, made it very clear with his warning about the military industrial complex that something else is going on. And So there'd be like these invitations. I've been to the White House. I've eaten dinner with the Bushes, and I knew. And I remember shaking his hand, and I was just like,
the old fella or the younger boy?
The older.
The older boy.
I was so creeped out. I think I was 16 years old, and it was a bicentennial dinner, right? So the White House sort of had an obligation to still honor former presidents. So as much as the facade was, okay, they're acting like Eisenhower's a good guy and they like Eisenhower, but they don't realize that Eisenhower was, well, they do, but the public doesn't realize, or pockets of the population, because I think a lot of people realize the warning about the military industrial complex was very much about the rise of misplaced power, and that it would infect and impact the office of the presidency. So that particular window was a very strange one, because, okay, so while Bush Sr.'s in office, he's throwing this bash, because he kind of has to, of the bicentennial dinner in celebration of Eisenhower. But really, the truth is that Eisenhower warned us with his final speech about something that these family lines are involved in, how much he knows the deeper details well, people like us are here to figure that out. And I know he knows now, and he was given a lot more information maybe towards the end of the presidency or afterwards, that he was warning us about these very people. So I remember going to that party, and it wasn't like, it was just at the White House, and we had round tables, and Bush and Barber were right behind me. And then it was time to shake their hands. And I remember, because I was like just a rebellious, like really wild child. Like my mom didn't want to take me anywhere because I was totally embarrassing with my loud mouth. And I was telling you, every time she'd take me to any kind of gathering, I would start to talk to, like Sam Donaldson would be here, or some of these newscasters, Chris Matthews, and I would just go up and be like, hi, I've got this mission and this and that. And like, and my mom just, no. And I don't want to say anything negative, but it's kind of like, you don't know what she's going to say or how much she knows and if it's even accurate. So I tried to be but I remember shaking Bush Sr.'s hand, and I just remember looking at him and just being like, I know there's something going on here, and this is showdown time, and this is the kind of stuff that, we're dealing with. One of the things that I'm really grateful for is I was able to see through the facades. I might not fully understand quite what I was seeing, but I could see it. And so I had to hold a lot of my space for myself to be present with what my intuition and my higher guidance is telling me. And that's also why I live down the road, because how can I possibly do schooling or pay attention and sit still in class as children, of course, with the ADD part of it, but like later. So I set up enough opportunities for myself to get the space I needed to really process through and begin to really, really see this game being played, the greatest deceptions that are in front of us. And of course, listening to whistleblowers, doing research, listening to victim testimony has played a huge part. But my background's in wilderness education, so I got a lot of time in nature. And it really helped me to kind of cleanse and overcome going to high school in the DC area. Because as much as I was born in England, we moved around and ended up in DC, where my mom ended up running Eisenhower Institution, started writing books, started to get really involved with Russia, married a Russian physicist who was a science advisor to Gorbachev. And I remember flying off to Russia at 16 and paparazzi everywhere because he's a science advisor to Gorbachev. Susan's the granddaughter of Eisenhower. So there was political cartoons where my mom had a little angel wing with an American flag and Roald had a Russian flag. And Gorbachev cheered them on saying, this represents the end of the Cold War, is that you two came together.
Wow.
If I could do a good Russian accent, I would. And so I remember just sitting there, watching all this, just like, what the hell is going on? How did I end up here?
That is fascinating. How amazing as well to have like two global powers come together. Yeah, there's so much, when the Russians were perceived to be potentially truthfully the very first country to actually put a physical body into space, their Sputnik. And then the Americans shit themselves because they're like, fuck, we need to be the first, because there's massive egos across the world, unfortunately. And there always have been. And so the Americans are like doing deals with the Germans, with the Nazis, the Third Reich, whatever, because they had brilliant, and some, of course, the most insanely evil beings that ever lived, walked, or breathed on this beautiful planet of ours. But the Americans did tons of deals, which became Project Paperclip, as we know. And if anybody cares to look that up, that hasn't have an awareness of that right now, Project Paperclip was when the Americans made deals with the Germans to come across to America and say, help us launch shit into space. Then they left a bunch of Germans in Antarctica. And another thing about that, Antarctica, it makes me laugh because everyone's like, oh, it's so cold there. It's so freezing cold. And then, there's this massive global warming, but no one's talking about the heat under Antarctica or the volcanoes that naturally erupt, creating a heat, creating an Antarctic situation where there's, the temperature under there is 72 degrees. It's perfectly livable. It's been livable for a long, long time. But these are things that people don't seem to either have even an inkling of, an awareness of, or access to information. So doing a broadcast like this, Laura, is beautiful, just to drop little droplets for those that don't have any idea, So your grandfather, your great-grandfather, what stories did you hear about him? Like, what was he like as a family member? Did he have any quirks? Did he smoke? Did he have a song he loved? Was there a book he read? Like, what were the things you heard about him?
Oh, well, I'll go into that, but I just have to say, like, when you were saying all that, and I remember with your last question, I was going to actually lead into that, where that facade that I'm talking about of we won the Second World War, and that it's sort of, it looks like that in the history books, while this silent infiltration is taking place because of paperclip. I was actually going to bring that in, so I'm glad you brought that up. And when you look at Antarctica, as you were saying that, it's like a memory frozen in time, because it seems to be connected to Atlantis. So when I just feel into the vibration of it and the warmth underneath it, it's like a dormant memory frozen in time. It's like a big piece of who we are frozen in time, and almost being invaded by what we experience as humans with amnesia, where we're easily, kind of infiltrated. So funny that became a base, even though the Atlantean era was very much where the cabal and the covert creation of Illuminati really began to take place. So just wanted to, mention that. And yeah, after the Atlantean cataclysms and what it did to our DNA as well, and the planetary body, we weren't able to access galactic memories or have full capacity to, see a much larger picture. So anyway, Eisenhower was a great family member. There's so many photographs of him and the grandkids. I mean, Val Thor really confirmed that as well when he said he was so inspired by Eisenhower's love for his grandchildren that he decided to have a family. I've heard a lot of channelings. I don't consider that every channeling is going to be 100% spot on. And some channelers I'm kind of wary of because they might not be channeling an authentic light being, even though it might appear to be benevolent. I've always been very wary. But folks like Carl Mollison, who channeled Eisenhower, when he explained the galactic history, things about the Anunnaki, and things about him and his character, I had like goosebumps the whole time. And anybody, you can look it up. Carl Mollison channels Dwight Eisenhower. And there's a huge portion of that exchange and that channel where he's talking about light workers and how one of the toughest things that light workers are dealing with is the fact that they don't believe in themselves. They have a lot of self-doubt. They have a lot of wounds and traumas because of the targeting. And that is so important that we believe in ourselves, and that he said that we've won and the light is going to win. But I mean, obviously there's quite a bit to go through. I would love to hear a new transmission of energy. And there's been bits and pieces coming in about what he's thinking and seeing or feeling about these times we're in. But Val Thor is playing a really great role as far as that. And Eisenhower's not far away. I feel a little bit more cut off than normal as far as getting messages from him, but I'm not worried about it. I know he's busy because he hasn't left taking care of the human race and still caring. And there's so much coming through about how he's feeling and his sorrows. So yeah, he smoked cigarettes. He had 8 heart attacks during the presidency. I think he smoked a lot. A lot of them were very mini kind of heart attacks. So, I mean, but that was what was told to me. And I bet it's written somewhere. I could definitely reconfirm it by texting my mom. I'm like, didn't you say that? Because I've heard it quite often. Right. So he's definitely a major smoker. And
great heart attack, Laura. You know that.
What's that?
Smoking is not the only reason. Like, you're talking about a man here who you came to understand through family stories and your own spiritual connection was a beautiful, loving man who understood it's not just global information here, it's also off planet, which we'll come to. A person that has a heart attack invariably has a broken heart, is trying to carry someone in his position, carrying the love for humanity, the fear and terror for humanity. So I would suggest that those 8 potential heart attacks were not all cigarette smoking related.
Oh, no, absolutely. And you said that so well, and it's so true. I feel tobacco has its place. It can be medicinal. I feel his sorrow and his heartbreak. He was medicating with cigarettes. I don't think that was the main cause. It certainly, probably didn't help. But when there's deep heartache, you can die of a broken heart. I felt like I was going to die of a broken heart quite a number of times. And that's been the hardest thing kind of to recover from. I can't think of a worse death than feeling betrayed on a heart level. I mean, I can completely relate to how that is such a killer. And for some people, they can maybe not be engaged on that soul matrix, or it might not matter as much. They can just move on to the next person, or just kind of reset, or just be like, oh, well, they were a jerk anyway, or an asshole. I can go us here. Anyway, and just kind of bounce back. It's a lot harder for me, especially when children were involved. And I've had a lot of heart pain. I've been in the hospital. I never went to doctors growing up, but at a certain stage and just the heartbreak of really understanding what's going on a global level and having a lot of personal challenges, I had so many visits to the hospital because I was thinking about him. I'm like, not so much in the moment, but I would reflect on it, after, where I had such extreme panic attacks, or I was really, really close to having a stroke or heart attack. And actually I did have a pulmonary embolism, was in the hospital before. And it was really because of a broken heart and the grief in my lungs and I wasn't able to take care of myself. I was so stressed, and that's so rare. And this was recently. So so I cut myself slack, and I forgive myself for maybe just not being able to get out and exercise and be all positive and love and light. And I remember he would kind of like put his hands on me and help me to reflect with him and just give me that compassion and support and understanding of, there's no shame in feeling a lot and caring so much that it hurts. So, and that's helped me to kind of recover and heal without being like, God, you should be stronger than that. And I have been strong, so it's okay. And here I am today, and I'm doing pretty good. The world is, crazy. As far as music and other people, I'm not, those are such good questions. And I would, definitely like to know, but he was such a family man. And I remember going to Gettysburg Farm when Mamie was on her deathbed. I never got to meet him except for in spirit form.
So say who Mamie is and Gettysburg Farm, darling.
What's that?
Say who Mamie is and Gettysburg Farm.
Yes. Okay, so Mamie's his wife, and they lived at Gettysburg Farm. And the grandkids spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time there growing up. And it's crazy because when we go back and visit, it's a museum now. So it's not like, oh, we can just go and utilize the farmland and have this great, house that's been left to us as just, that's what people do when they get land. They usually pass it down to their kids. So it's just so surreal to go, and it's like a museum, and we're going on a guided tour to a place we slept and ate, especially, my aunts and uncles and mom, way more than me. It's just like you're behind this gate with plexiglass, and you're literally looking at the bed you slept in with your sister, and the porch you used to hang out in. And I remember, and just like looking at the bedroom, and this flashing back to holding Mamie's hand, Eisenhower's wife, first lady, holding her hand while she was on her deathbed at the age of 4. And it was just so surreal. And I've been back there quite a number of times, and the Secret Servicemen, the little museum they have, and those that still are alive that worked closely with him, the stories that they would tell, or just the feeling of like heart, family. It's like the Secret Servicemen that were still there. Well, actually, before it was a museum, when we visited, they were the coolest. They had little nicknames for us. I think it was like, gosh, I should remember. It was like pumpkin pie. It was just something cute. and we were just total buddies with the security, with the Secret Servicemen. So it was very different for my mom growing up, because she had Secret Servicemen that would follow her to school and like watch out for her, because at that time her grandfather was in office. None of that took place in our childhood. We never had that kind of security or protection. Yeah. But I do remember those early years before the Gettysburg Farm became a museum, that we would bond with them. And then after it became a museum, seeing some of the people that remember them, and some had passed on, they spoke, so highly of him and his level of fairness and respect and love for his family. He was a great artist. He had a lot of interesting Native American art. So there's a lot of his artwork around, some really incredible pieces of, like there's this one of a Native American, which was very well done. So I would say that's one big thing, is he loved to do art. And my mom has a lot of his original pieces at the house. And I just know he has this incredible love for humanity. And that is really kind of what brought in the connection with the benevolent ETs, is that they noticed this about somebody that wanted to take down this level of tyranny that was spreading like a cancer.
Right.
And even in the Law of One, they mention it. What's that?
I know you mentioned the Law of One, which is a book for people that don't know. It's a set of rules, and it's something that a lot of people get into. But I'm loving that you're sharing that your wife's great-grandfather, he was president of the United States, created artwork of our indigenous brothers and sisters, the Native American, Indian people. again, they're called the Indians, in case someone doesn't know, because Columbus was looking for India, and he stumbled into America that he didn't discover, because America wasn't actually lost. It already existed. It always makes me laugh, that. And I think, where did America get its name? Most people don't know. Well, in the days when people were going around the world, the cartographers mapping land masses, Amerigo Vespucci was an Italian cartographer, and America is named after him. Right. So America gets its name after a cool Italian guy, Italiano. It's just like, there's so many elements of history that people don't even think about, and that's okay. But it's like telling your story, Laura, and giving all these different layers and levels of it. This is the kind of interview that wake people up on a massive level, because we're not going too out there yet. We're just about to, but we're talking about human heart to heart, human legacy, family love, somebody who had a position of such inordinate power that his legacy lives on through you. And part of your life mission is to put the record straight and clear up all the lies and bullshit that have been written about your great-grandfather, told about your great-grandfather. And it always reminds me of all these bloody presidents and prime ministers on the planet. When I went to Egypt, I was in Luxor for a while, always obsessed with Egypt, always drawn there. Long story short, as I got to understand all these different temples and how they were built, and that each pharaoh or king, but each pharaoh that came to an amazing temple that, let's say, Queen Hatshepsut, who was the only female pharaoh, who is buried in the Valley of the Kings. Now, I would have loved to have met that woman, I'm telling you, because she's so fascinating. But as an example, when a pharaoh created their own temple or took over the remnants of the pharaoh's temple before, because they were always trying to build bigger, build better, like really bring it, the new pharaoh would do everything in their power to delete anything about the pharaoh before them. They would chip off, and I mean, the Romans, screwed up a lot of the art. They come and chop their noses off and hack the noses off. And obviously Christianity was trying to force itself. Honestly, when will the Christians learn? The Romans, Catholics, like, get out of here. We've got these beautiful earth indigenous vibrations and feelings that as humans, we all respond to. Stop trying to make everybody do what you want them to do. It's so dull and so boring. But getting back to the Egyptians, the deletion of any former historical information was massive. And I'll never forget, and I'm not going to get into politics or say I like this person or not. It's not about me. It's about you and your grandfather and sharing a story. But I remember when a certain president came into power, let's say in the last 16 years, and I was watching this bloke sit in the White House in the Oval Office, signing all these executive orders. And I remember looking at this thinking, that man is deleting every single policy that the president before him or her, you haven't had any females yet in the White House, shame, good women anyway, running the country. And it's like, that's what they're doing. It's like the same bullshit of humanity, the ego that drives man, woman in a position of power. Like, let's just change everything. And like, honestly, it is like watching 4-year-olds fight over paint, Play-Doh, or we as humans are so tired of the tyrannical, egotistical bollocks that pervades on our planet. It's like, enough already.
I know.
But, I do feel that, like you and I, for example, on the same page of being like, the people in power are getting a spanking and they need one. And it's time for them to step down, sit down, shut up and listen to humanity, because you work for us. Hello, right? Every governing body, every power, without exception, you work for us, for humanity. Your job that we pay you to do, get on and do it, or sit down, shut up, and let humanity evolve in the way it's going to. I'm going to get off my soapbox, darling, because
that's so awesome. And that's exactly, and we're right there in the most critical time right now. And this very much connects to a lot of the competing agendas of different off-planet groups, how that also connects to subterranean civilizations that are underground. And just the service to self, service to others sort of split between what makes species fundamentally different, not just based on appearance, but based on soul orientation or soulless non-orientation with pretty much anything, but a almost addiction or merging with AI to such a degree that that person is not in possession of themselves, and the reptilian draconian reptilian agenda has been able to masterfully split a person through trauma-based mind control to such a degree that their genetic makeup that the reptilians hybridized is able to allow that physical vessel to hold a reptilian shape-shifting form, to like literally compromise the whole of humanity under the guise that it's about our safety and protection. And I don't know how anybody is falling for this. I mean, because it's so obvious. There would be no fast food place if this was about our public health. There would be no cigarettes that we could buy. And the fact that our skies have been sprayed, and that's been largely ignored. That was the first warning on a major obvious way that a lot of people ignored. Knowing that there's fluoride in our water. You know, what is Monsanto? What are GMOs? You know, and weather weapons. It's like, there's so many people that had such a blind eye to that, and 9/11 and other false flags, that
oh my God,
it's hard to feel sorry for them at this point, because how many warnings does a person need? How many obvious in your face stuff? And I do have compassion for the ones that are super loving and are just feeling compromised, or they just didn't do enough research about certain aspects of this or this particular part of where we are in the agenda. They think, you know, positive leadership is behind and can at least admit to some other level of corruption. I feel sorry for the ones that are still very heart-based, but the ones that are spewing these false narratives and really acting as the mind virus that is spreading this hatred and toxicity, it's really hard to deal with those people. And that's why boundaries and blocking, of course, but it's sort of like, if you don't get it by now, I don't know what kind of smack in the face, because they need to sit down and shut up, just like you were calling out those that are in leadership positions, because they are literally a part of feeding it, allowing themselves to be siphoned and enabling these artificial timelines and cheering them on. It's just like, you need to sit down and shut up too.
Exactly. Sit down and shut up right now, please, and just listen. Or don't listen, just be quiet. Follow the leader that's not doing anything, but forcing you to live in an element of fear. Because we are sovereign. People say that word, but to me, it's like, I own me. I own Dani Henderson. No one owns Dani Henderson, not my mom, my dad, any husbands, boyfriends, lovers. No one owns me, not one person. Not one person on the planet can tell me what to do. Kiss my hairy ass. I am a human and I am free and I am fiery and I am feisty, and I will hand you your ass, because it is time. It's like, when did we give up our souls? When did we stop like saying, excuse me, could you explain that to me, please? You know, it's like, enough already. Like, we're living in a military, globalistic, bullshit, boring word. And the biggest element to me, the emotion of fear, when you are a spineless, evil person, of which there are so many, the only way that you can control a loving species is to dominate them by fear.
Oh yeah.
And the beloved Jewish people, the Holocaust, you know, survivors, let's talk about those that have been alive enough to tell us their stories. You know, every day waking up thinking, am I going to die today? Oh, look, I'm watching someone get raped to death, someone get chopped up to death, a child being murdered in front of people. And, you know, I knew people. I was lucky, but the stories were horrendous. I mentioned them, my friend Mayu Soro Espinosa, who was royal family, Estonian royal family, stolen by the Nazis and survived 6 death camps. And, you know, by the time, I mean, the mind gets so fracked and decompartmentalized. And then obviously at that stage, when someone has been so badly abused, and so many people that suffer abuse, it creates a fracking in the mind, split personality. Well, yeah, because they couldn't possibly just remember what happened yesterday. That's enough to end your life, you know.
It's a survival response, and they know that. That's why they use trauma-based mind control, because they know that the survival of that person will create that alter. And so many don't survive, but a lot do, and they splinter. So the level of trauma with, Holocaust victims, those that weren't in these MK Ultra programs or born into Illuminati bloodlines where they sell their kids off to this stuff,
Right.
traumatized.
It's a good point, darling.
But yeah, keep going though. Yeah.
You know what? Because I mean, really, I know we're going off into other areas that we're both very passionate about, and I'm wondering whether we should wrap up with your beautiful grandfather, so we can retain some purity around him and his legacy. Because I want to talk about Valiant Thought also coming into the presidency, and then if you're happy, we could stop this and then start another one. Because you mentioned 9/11. I mean, I'm really happy to go there, and we could do two separate entities if you would like.
Sure, we could do part one. Are you talking about like part one, part two?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, we could definitely do part two. Maybe later this week. I don't know. I have to do a test thing. But I still got enough time to just keep going. So
I know. We'll be here for hours, darling.
I know we could, absolutely.
We're both ADD. We're going to be here for like 6 hours. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I could totally talk to you all day and night and week and.
I know.
There's so many, dimensions to all this, and absolutely, just real quick. And I know you want to shift gears, but the horrificness, it is mind blowing. The amount of stories that I've heard, the amount of documentaries I've seen, it's so unbelievable. And one of the ones that really touched my heart, was Rutka, who had the diary similar to Anne Frank. I don't know if you've heard of her. I would recommend that people watch the documentary about Rutka, who left a diary, who was in the ghettos that they had in Poland when the invasion happened through a false flag event, like they still do. And anyway, she was just a young girl, and she wrote everything down before she was taken to Auschwitz, and her whole family perished. They found her diary. Her half sister found her diary, and I don't want to get into the gruesome details of, what the end was, but it's so horrific. And when we look at the prisoners of war that are happening right here in the United States because of these different events, like, the Capitol, the January 6th event at the Capitol, what they are doing and how they're torturing these people that were peacefully protesting, that were just there, or maybe got inside and the police let them inside. We're already dealing with that. We're dealing with parents being separated from their kids and taken to COVID detention camps. Oh. And these things are happening across the world. And so knowing this level of history and not being a Holocaust denier, I think we haven't gotten the full story and full picture, but when, like you were saying with the pharaohs, when they try and wipe that piece of history away, nobody is seeing the signs anymore. Future generations aren't able to read the signs except for in their intuition. Right. The masking and all these different tactics make a person so disconnected from their intuition, they can't even navigate this anymore. And we're dealing with a very, very similar deal where it's not about race or religion like they taught us to think. It's about control, tyranny, and finding whatever is the latest narrative that will hook people in enough to cause people to turn on their friends and family out of belief systems and narratives that are absolute bogus bullshit.
Exactly. For me, what I look at, what I think, like you having studied history, his story my entire life, and always questioned everything, is that we are, I believe, like the Germans, the Holocaust is horrific, horrendous, terrible travesty to humanity that occurred. That happened, and that was like model one in terms of let's say from 1900. Right? From 1900 on, and we're in 1941, 42, 43, World War II. Then what we're looking at is the Germans rolled out a plan to genocide a people, because Hitler had this thing about blue-eyed blondes, and he was a complete crazy person on many levels. And, he was going to get points from the superiors that owned and ran him by genociding and by putting in new plans to harm and hurt the beautiful Jewish people. So for me, I'm like, I've been saying for over a year and a half now, we're in a global Holocaust. And it's a horrible thing to say. When I heard myself saying it, I felt a physical punch, like a physical wounding. I'm like, Dani, how could you even say that out loud? We are in a global Holocaust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And your grandfather, sorry to interrupt you, darling.
No, I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah. Your great-grandfather was someone who tried to warn humanity about this event.
And you could only say so much. The level of threats that a person's under. And this is why I know that we linked up on a spiritual soul level. He was actually briefed that a descendant would be born that would help him to do what he couldn't do. And I don't take credit. I see that there's a specific role each family member plays.
Right.
I know I'm going into more out there territory and places that they're not really able to touch, but you know, but I found this out from those that were wishing to take me off planet so that I couldn't, you know, do this mission, which is a whole other story. But you know, the Nordics, the reason they gave the Nordics such attention, the Aryans are a root race, just like the Lemurians, the Atlanteans, the Hyperboreans, the Polaris group, the Moravians. Some people don't say it like that. I don't always say things in the way other Merovingians, thank you. All these different root races were meant to come together to help us to rebuild our DNA architecture, but the reptilians hybridized with the Nordics. So they were convincing the Nordics like, oh, you're the advanced race. No. They got infected by negative ego through the aggressive reptilian agenda mindset ideology that hybridized with the Nordic race. So the humans that came out of that hybridization program were very much all about superiority, ego. It's all about me, and we're the advanced race. When true Nordics that aren't a part of that didn't get hybridized when they first got attacked in Lyra, have tried to lend a helping hand, but their genetics got mixed up with the reptilians. And so when somebody like Hitler or any of these individuals are being mind controlled, they're being, you know, taught to protect the purity of a race and not allow anything else to incarnate through that race. Whereas the starseed families and the advanced groups allow anybody to incarnate in order to heal and rehabilitate. But a negative entity, service to self being, or somebody who's just running a bad mind control operation without realizing it has to have the soul strength to say, I need to rehabilitate. And starseed families allow them to come in, whereas they will block any genetic healing in their own bloodlines, and they won't let starseeds be incarnated through their family lines. Yeah. But when you look at some of the people that have survived MK Ultra, or maybe weren't Illuminati families, but like Kathy O'Brien, a deal was made because her father was a pedophile. Like, okay, we won't charge you if you give us your daughter. So that's a different scenario. So she doesn't have, so she's a bit of an anomaly. Same with Tony Rodriguez, because it was based in some like altercation that went down at his school. They pulled them in hoping, and it was almost like they didn't know. I mean, I don't know with their time travel technology. And I'll shut up in a second because I know we want to shift gears.
No, don't tell
they had sort of the anomaly of being able to come in with a different genetic makeup so that they could override the mind control and the level of abuses. Because they pulled them in from outside of the bloodline. Yeah. And you know, maybe they're being punished for it because it's like, oh my gosh, now they're writing books and they're whistleblowers. Like, whoops.
Yeah. So it's incredible. So everything that you've said, so many people who are already, you know, pushing beyond the bounds of what they've been told to think and believe as history. There are so many people, thank goodness, who are like very much aware that we are not the only race in the entire universe, but there are obviously people that are going to see this broadcast between you and I that don't know that. So just to educate them and bring them up to steam just a little bit, you know, you are a forthright speaker and lecturer, and have been for many, many years, in bringing information about other people from other civilizations, meaning there are other beings that have been known as aliens and different races for so many years. I mean, people talk a lot about the Bible, that even in the Bible, other beings from other civilizations or the sky, just look at angels. It becomes very easy when we gently bring information where people are like, oh my God, that's not about Christianity. Shut up and die, you blasphemer, blasphemer. You know, when people sit down, shut up just for a moment, stop trying to follow something they've been told to believe, and just go, do you know what? I'm just going to have a little think about this. When you decide to yourself, maybe if I listen to other information and expand my beautiful brain that's mine, that I'm not going to go to hell if I listen to something else. That's how humanity has controlled humanity. That's how the arsewips at the top have controlled the people. It's just insane, right? It's crazy town. So you're talking about Nordics, you're talking about reptilians, about Draco. So just in a nutshell, what are you saying? Who are these species and what did they do with our human brothers and sisters?
Well, I mean, these species or these ET groups are a part of our galactic heritage. It's encoded in our DNA, in our dormant DNA, and what they call junk DNA, that we have connection to these higher harmonic universes that take us back to the core seeding of human life in the time matrix, coming through from the guardian founder groups, the cosmic trinity that has, we're talking Elohim and Seraphim as being some of the main groups that ended up at war with each other with the fallen races. So I feel, because it's a free will universe, and the masculine and feminine began to get a bit differentiated, and this sort of Luciferian rebellion kind of energy that brought in a lot of fallen groups and convinced them to be a part of this, and the hybridization that took place opened a portal, I guess you could say, of the really, really heavy kind of warring groups of the Draco Reptilian that they formed kind of an alliance with in order to gain control, and they compromised their DNA. On an earthly level, after we sunk down into this lower density, we're dealing with so many cataclysms, floods, pole shifts, and the breakup of continents that it destroyed Earth's more advanced civilizations. And the survivors had a really, really hard time rebuilding their culture or preserving any of that higher civilization. And that's why some of the lower creator gods or Anunnaki that started to really interact with Earth decided to genetically manipulate humans so that they could become a slave race, because things were a little bit difficult for them as well. Some do have alliances with those Dracos, some don't. So you have a lot of deity kind of energies or archetypal energies within those pantheons that are trying to correct what especially like Enki and Enlil got caught up in, because their lines got infiltrated by reptilians. So it started with Seraphim, fallen Seraphim connected to Lucifer, Enki, the fallen Elohim connected to Enlil and Jehovah and the floods and this and that. So these have been like competing brothers. And then you got the goddess energy, the Gen Isis, that brought in the Grail lines, the angelic lines, and that greater journey to go into the underworlds and come back up again in order to regenerate and rebuild and reflourish human life, and help us to activate our dormant DNA, which is what this ascension window is all about. And the Venus transits and the fact that the sun started to move to the 13th sign, and how the timelines have shifted, and the Andromedan energy is able to connect with us again because the galactic cores have reconnected. Before all the root races had come about, the Aquafarians came in. And if you look at, Aqua Rays, the mother arc, the Aquafarians were actually Andromedan. They went extinct during the electrical wars. So systematically, the removal of advanced beings that were very much here to assist were not able to incarnate anymore. But so many of us as humans have that galactic heritage and inheritance that when we can hold space for ourselves to begin to tap into, we recognize, wait a second, we are the ETs. And future aspects of ourselves might be coming in to warn us. Digress versions of ourselves might be coming in to abduct us. I mean, everybody's got a different story. But when we're dealing with off-planet stuff, we're not dealing with time in the way that we are as we incarnate into the time loop, in the holographic time loop. So I feel like these are the extraterrestrials are aspects of ourselves that are helping us to rebuild our DNA architecture. And we might have more of an affinity to certain parts of it all, right? But eventually, at the end of the day, we're helping each other rebuild our DNA architecture to be whole again, and recognize that all these different star systems, all these different species, we are a part of. Our organs connect to the planets. Our energetic body connects to the ley lines and planetary grid network. Our DNA does as well. Our galactic chakras and our chakra system connects to the multidimensional cosmos. So there's been a lot of compartmentalization in our chakra system, to the point where there are dominant traits that people carry that keep us from the rest of the picture. So you'll find some people are floating in their higher chakras and they don't know how to ground, they don't know how to deal, they don't know how to take care of themselves in the physical plane. Then you got some people that are super grounded and they're just like able to just like function as a human, wake up at 6 a.m. and just be like, woohoo. So sometimes those people come together to help fill in those places that would be too much for us to bring in at this stage in the game. But ultimately, we're helping each other to become whole again. and we'll recognize, oh my gosh, all of it is a part of us. So if there's a certain affinity, it's because diversity functions well. And we kind of need to play different roles, just like we see with ecosystems in the web of life. But it doesn't mean we can't have a likeness or that common thread of connecting with the 0-point unified field. Right. So we help each other, rebuild our DNA. We help each other to see the shadow parts of ourselves when we, find ourselves maybe with narcissists or abusers. I mean, it's all part of this greater work, understanding that even the reptilians and these more malevolent groups are showing that shadow side of what we need to work on and what we need to go through to cleanse ourselves of it, so that we can be a living example of a planetary system, that works, that is in a higher frequency of synchronicity, of abundance, based in the currency of love with Mother Earth, who's abundant and gives us food, gives us miracles,
everything we ever needed.
Cosmic connection with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm rambling.
Again, Laura, I got to smack your hand. Stop apologizing, okay? Because what you are gifting us is a legacy, a lifetime of your own humanistic essence being on the planet. And another reason why you're ADD, right? Because your brain is working so fast. So it's literally like if somebody hasn't ever had an education on other people from other civilizations and how a lot of these different civilizations work and come together, some of the actual historical galactic truths that happen, because this is a beautiful planet. I mean, look at her. She's absolutely beyond.
And the creatures, I mean, look at the ocean creatures and the animals. I mean, they're just as wild and unique and crazy, awesome as what we see with aliens. Like, why is it so hard for people to wrap their head around a multidimensional or
exactly.
space or cosmos might not have other life? We go into the ocean and it's teeming with life. So how could our universe not be?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's just such small thinking. And then again, if anyone of any religion, and you go, they go, oh, we can't believe in a person, people that you can't see. Well, what about Jesus? You can't see him. What about God? You can't see him, her, that, it, creator, source, whatever. It's like we just got to raise up our own ability to give ourselves permission to go, do you know what? I'm going to have a little thinky about this, a little thinky dink. And like, if we go back the last 15 minutes from this point of this broadcast, and you give a complete rundown of at least 12 different civilizations, species, I think people should take notes and then don't Google it. Go on DuckDuckGo, go on another browser. We got to get away from this, monopolization of every single corporate entity. Oh, you want to find something, you got to go on this, or you got to go on that. No, you don't. You're going to give yourself permission to go play wherever you want. But yeah, I think, Laura, the last 15 minutes of you, just that narrative, it was like, well, I remember in 2012 when you were on stage and it was like a United Nations event, that's kind of, element, and you were just up there and you were just giving, gifting, sharing, speaking truth into people, ideas, expressions, possibilities into people, and you're still doing it. And it's amazing. And we thank you for it, darling. We do. I want to bring it back to your beautiful great-grandfather, who I know is part of the mission that you have on this planet while you're here. And I think that we might want to just touch on, you mentioned Valthor a few times. I want to tell my own first connection to Valthor, Valiant Thor, was reading about the White House. I remember in 2017, I took a photograph of this beautiful man that came from somewhere, that entered the White House during a great-grandfather's presidency or reign. And this man was able to infiltrate any room he wanted. The secret security or the secret service was so pissed off with this person that your great-grandfather had let in the White House, who said he was from Venus and was bringing information to help humanity. And then the second time that he really, I had a crush on him, I'm not going to lie, before I met my late fiance. I thought Valthor was all that in a bag of chips. I thought, how exciting, what a gorgeous looking being he is. And then I met our joint friend, Elena Danan. And it's funny because I watched her tonight when she actually physically met him. recently. I said to her, I left her a message, I said, darling, you should poke that video out there again, because she's so like, holy fuck, I just met Val Thor. And that's a really great watch. So elenadenan.org. She's a friend of Laura and I. She's somebody I love to the ends of the earth. She's such a star sister. And she also has her own connection and has had, and that's exciting too. Your great-grandfather, mate, seriously, share a little bit about what you were told from family members and from your own experience of your great-grandfather and this man known as Valiant Thor or Val Thor.
I don't have anything from family members. This has been a very independent journey. I don't have any inside information coming from family. But I have to say, you know, I'm close with them. I do feel there's certain things that they are not able to share. I mean, they must have noticed something. They must know something. And I do feel that at that time when he was in office of presidency and they were in their teenage years, and because they're all very, you know, close in age, that they were told what the public hears about Eisenhower going to a dentist appointment, at least for that first contact. So, okay, well, if the public's being told that he went to a dentist appointment in Palm Springs, there's probably going to be a cover-up connected to the Greys, unless there's a group of individuals that only want to focus on that and forget about this larger picture of what happened in that initial encounter with the Nordics. And were the Nordics easily trustworthy because of the history of Nordics and the hybridization with reptilians, even as far back as the Lyran Wars, and when the Lyran system collapsed and we lost connection to our avatar consciousness, which is when our 12-strand DNA is fully activated to the point where we can come and go in the physical as we please. So we went on this free will journey to lose it and regain it. Okay, so I never heard anything much from family. I feel they were sheltered, protected, and just kind of given the same sort of narrative. For all I know, they know a lot more. My mom kind of leaked out, well, you know, we were told for your protection to not really go there. And it's like, well, kind of too late. I don't know if you've watched any.
Have you seen my lectures the last 20 years? Hello.
Yeah. And I don't want to say anything, you know, I mean, my mom is awesome and she's great, but I mean, this is just over the years. So, and I don't know, maybe she's seen something. And I mean, I'm in all support of my family, and what they know or don't know, I have no judgments about. It's very, very tricky and sticky and crazy. So I never really heard anything at all from family. There was a few little leaks here and there, and I started to kind of check it with my intuition about it to kind of see where they're at. And then I just knew kind of just to leave it alone and just do what I do. But what I have heard mostly comes from the Frank Strange's book, folks like Rob Potter, Raymond Keller, who we interviewed, who is connected with Venus, Craig Campobasso, who's producer of the movie Stranger at the Pentagon, which actually is one of the few movies that has extraterrestrial energy in it that says based on a true story. Most times you have to say it's fiction.
Right.
So that was pretty wild. And he's a great friend. He's written some books. He's a major contact. He went to his house a few times, and he gave my boys all sorts of memorabilia, Val Thor necklaces and books. And like, you know, they were just like, oh, this is so cool. And they were just, you know, little kids where, you know, they're happy if, well, I guess it's not baseball cards, more like Pokemon for children these days. But anyway, they were just thrilled. And it was really cool because it was a huge activation for them. But anyway, yeah. What I heard, you know, through all that, and Elena can really just bring even more clarity to it because of her contact experience. And just reading Frank Strange's book that had more of a direct earthly experience, where Elena's obviously, you know, when Val Thor is not here on the planet. So connecting those dots, and I think it'd be really great to actually do a roundtable, and it'd be awesome if you were there too, where we talk to people that knew Val Thor on an earthly level that are still alive. And then, you know, Elena, who had contact with him on a non-earth
contact.
Yeah. So, you know, just that they were put on VIP status for 3 years at the Pentagon. And Val made it very clear what his mission was. Eisenhower was all about it. He actually became close with Nixon as well. I think Nixon was a bit compromised, though, especially listening to some people's experiences. So I don't know. And there's nothing I can really say about that. But Elena has confirmed this friendship that was formed between Eisenhower and him. And it was just like with the Nordics. It got shot down. It got vetoed. He wanted to align with Val Thor's mission. They wouldn't allow it. And this is when it becomes real obvious that the president doesn't have as much power as people think. He's dealing with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's dealing with certain advisors and the shadow government control forces that literally will either lie to you, betray you, or like really, kind of shut something down. And there's a lot about that, of understanding the legalities, the government structure, at that particular time, and how that was even possible, that the authority of a president didn't supersede or override that of those around him. But that is the nature of the shadow government, particularly, you mentioned Project Paperclip, all these things that happened in 1947 to set different laws in place to make certain things not accessible to the office of the presidency, things that are deemed top secret. And so Eisenhower, lost control, especially with the Greys and MJ-12 doing this behind his back with the
MJ-12 being his cabinet, Laura, because for people that don't know, MJ-12 were your great-grandfather's trusted guidance, counsel, military at the highest friggin' level. And your grandfather, we understand, great-grandfather was Val Thor introduced the highest technology that would help humanity. How would that technology have helped humanity, Laura?
Well, any of these technologies, I mean, most of the stuff connected to the Greys has to do with mind control, social engineering, the chemtrail agenda, some of that darker stuff. But some benevolent technology as well, but used and weaponized in a not so good way, because they do utilize, just like we see with chemtrails and HAARP, they utilize the elementals, they utilize chi, they utilize life force that they siphon and steal from humans. And so it's all geared towards that, because they're not connected to source anymore. They decided to be the controllers and keep us in prison so that we could be their food source. So the technologies of, Val Thor and the beings from Venus and that level of disclosure, and even with the Nordics, would have been really great. But these different laws put in place really happened and began before he stepped into the office of presidency, because Truman was part of the original seeding of MJ-12, and it got more and more infiltrated because of Paperclip. And because the names were whitewashed and nobody knew that these were, scientists and military doctor, whatever, ones that were involved in these death camps to do experimentations, were then becoming the new MJ-12. And it completely was almost like it's something that I don't think Eisenhower could process or really truly believe. And then he might have had that sort of fake ally that was just, encouraging to think. And then, to make a long story short, he realized that, which is why he gave the warning, and he wanted to invade Area 51 and put an end to this, and then realized, I don't have any access. So when Val Thor came around and the beings from Venus, even though he was able to put them on VIP status for 3 years, as they were trying to strategize how to make this work, and it had to be approved because the government structure was such that, all right, well, as we, I don't know why an executive order couldn't be signed. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if things changed in the governmental structure, but I do know, based on Elena's contacts, what Alex Collier has said, and others, like the names I mentioned in the books, that he was completely shut down. And Val and him remained friends. For many, I hear they're still, kind of in alliance and working together. But Val said, we're not going to give up. Like Elena's next book is, we will never give up on you, or we will always be here. I can't remember the name. I should.
She says that Val Thor said to her, we will never let you down.
Yes, we'll never let you down.
We will never let you down.
Yes. And so that's kind of what happened when it wasn't able to be a more public disclosure, which he wanted to do from the get-go with the Nordics. But I think also the deliberation or the time that it took to really kind of understand if their mission was legit, and the Nordics did warn that the Greys were going to come, they almost distracted. I don't know, but I know we're talking about Val. So anyway, what I heard was Val determined that he was still going to be present. And what I heard, and I got to ask Elena, because we haven't talked about this part of it, is that they put a bunch of motherships all over the planet that have sort of an invisible cloaking, like Lake Mead. People will go to Lake Mead and they'll notice an energetic field of like a craft, like we see cloud chips, right? So it's very similar. I don't know how close to the water it is or how high up it is. I mean, I gotta like go there. I can't believe I haven't been there yet because I travel a lot and do a lot of road trips. But supposedly, the original craft was Victor 1, but that there are other motherships parked all over the planet that you can't see that is connected to Val Thor and his team. So maybe I should just leave it at that. But from what I've come to understand is the original Nordics, they were coming from a pure place of being Nordic, are connected to the Galactic Federation of Worlds similar to Val Thor, and that this was kind of like, there's a strong connection there.
Yeah.
It's a lot to wrap one's head around, and that's why it's been so amazing to get to know her. Set the record straight about a lot, and it's obvious this woman has the highest integrity and is very just in her soul and true.
ElenaDanan.org, Elena Danan, and her book, she wrote this book, A Gift from the Stars, and in it she has illustrated over 120 other people from other civilizations. And
what? Oh, I was going to say, I got to do the forward to her next book. So
my God, she told me about that. She was in tears. Like, that's one of the other things I absolutely love about our sister is her complete humbleness. Like, she can't even believe the attention she gets. She can't believe that the level of interest in her, because she's just this sweet little, in so many ways, 5-year-old. But like I always say about our other friend, Alex Collier, like, don't mess with her. Don't mess with Elena, because she will also hand you your ass, because she is a warrior too. I want to loop back around to my understanding and, you know, the kind of support of your great-grandfather. My understanding, and millions of others who've ever heard or read or watched or seen any of the information, intel that came out about him at this time, that he was accused of withholding higher technology that would have helped humanity. There'd be no cancers, there'd be no disease, there'd be no starvation or poverty on the planet. We were told and led to understand that your great-grandfather did not sign a treaty that prevented humanity from having access to said technology. What we were led to understand was that his cabinet went behind his back and signed a treaty with those minging, funny-looking, evil as fuck, gray species known as gray aliens, who are headed up, guided by more nefarious species, reptilians, Draco. But also, people don't think for a minute that your human brothers and sisters on this planet who are in these positions of power aren't in cahoots with these other people from other civilizations. They are really as dumb as dirt. They really think that you're stupid, that you, human man that has a family and children, you're stupid, you are, or you're just going to go along with what you're being told to do. You mother looking after kids and parents and having an amazing job, you're so stupid. You're not going to question it. Oh, just go along with it. Everyone just like whoop, whoop, it's going to be okay. This is blowing up so much bigger. And Laura, you're coming from a place of love, are you not? Or Laura Eisenhower, are you looking to dominate the planet, darling?
Oh my God, I'm looking to help all that go away. And it's all about sovereignty, connecting to Mother Earth, connecting to the 0 point unified field, and experiencing our spirituality on our own terms, and also how we decide to take care of our human vessel and what we put in it. I don't have a mindset for domination. I don't actually understand it. Like, I don't even know if I've had that, and I don't want to be like, oh, I've never. It's so unfamiliar to me. It just doesn't make any sense. If I exert any force, it's the fight for justice. It's the fight to help and rescue children. And it's also, I don't like the word fight, but it's also the passion and desire to create harmonious and beautiful relationships, to really live on a deeper level so that we can assist each other in rehabilitating and healing, and we can be more honest and open and transparent about our process, so that we're not all just being like, there's new age bullshit, and you're going to pretend that like, oh, you just have all the answer. None of that resonates with me. We have to be as real and genuine as possible, or else we're not aligned with the truth frequency. We are feeding these entities that are using us and offering us these options as far as what might make us feel good or make us feel important or make us feel like we're on a spiritual path. That is absolute freaking bullshit. And the thing with the, Greys, the treaty began in 1933. And it was established by the Bavarian Thule and Illuminati societies. Even Phil Schneider talks about it. Then you have another renewal of it. Well, actually, this was around the Roosevelt administration. So supposedly it gets renewed every 10 years. And by the time Eisenhower's administration came in, they considered it a surrender. But then that is a little bit different than what we hear from like Elena and Alex, that they did it behind his back. So he was always about that level of disclosure. And I'm glad that Val Thor recognized him as a friend, because as much as Val Thor wanted to release these things to the public, I do believe that the positive Nordics came in and wanted to do the same. The problem is there's been so much indoctrination and mind control that even if these things were disclosed, you got a bunch of humans that have bought into the reptilian agenda without realizing it, that might not know how to use these technologies in the best way, because if they're channeling or connecting to an entity that says, oh, you have this in your hand, it's kind of like the ring of power, this could corrupt you. So there has to be sort of a mass awakening to like integrity, responsibility on a spiritual level, to know how to handle these technologies in a way that's not going to be harmful. Because I do feel outside of the Illuminati families and in the worst part of the cabal, that there's a lot of humans that have been infected by this kind of stuff, that are, the same kind of people that, are just going to want to drive that great sports car, hit on a chick, bang her, and leave her the next day. I mean, we're dealing with a human race that has been so compromised that I think there needs to be a great awakening on a massive scale before we're ready for these greater technologies. Or else I do feel they'd be a lot more accessible, but it still doesn't make it okay because of the people that are suffering that should have access. So I do feel that if a person trusts themselves and can begin to create that connection, that they will be given and shown these things, but it's not going to be just given out to humanity just yet. I think full disclosure is necessary, but to me, full disclosure is reminding people, you need to step it up. Stop being fucking pricks.
Yeah, totally. So let's finish with, the legacy of your grandfather, your great-grandfather, Dwight Eisenhower, President Dwight Eisenhower, who did leave, regardless of what people said, lied, accused him of. He did leave a beautiful legacy on this planet. And, you now, 2 generations on, you have a beautiful heart-to-heart and spiritual connection with him. You've shared with so many of us that your understanding is that part of your legacy and mission is to honor the memory of your great-grandfather and to put things right that others lied about. So if he was sitting next to you right now, what would you say to him?
Gosh, just you even saying that. Well, I'd first burst into tears and just hug him. I almost, what would I say to him? I don't know. That the power of the human spirit, we both agree upon, is greater than anything. Love is the highest frequency that can alchemize toxicity, dark weaponry, and everything into gold. This is the whole nature of alchemy. Alchemy is a property of nature. So is miracles. None of this is some anomaly that some have and some don't. We all have the ability to initiate into this divine inheritance. But we need to clear our negative ego, whether it's overly arrogant and exploiting of others, or it's totally insecure, broken, and lost and victim-based consciousness. But I do feel, I don't like when people go, oh, you're being a victim. No, there are victims. Let's help them. Let's not shame them for it. God, while everybody else is fighting about all these other forms of shaming, we need to help these victims. But yes, it's not a destination, neither is fear. So we need to look at these emotional energies or these responses, reactions that mostly are beyond choice. It's because we're traumatized that we can begin to hold hands, and that him and I would talk about rehabilitation, healing centers, the level of disclosure that you're talking about with these advanced technologies that people can find when they're ready and it's accessible. It's not going to be difficult for them to find, but it's not going to be blasted out under the rulership or leadership of this regime that is very based in communism, or this false media where it's like, oh, they're just going to mess with everybody's head as far as if you can have access, you're going to have to sell your soul first. What, to get access to life-saving technologies that are so this is the scary part, is we have to protect what is sacred. We have to protect certain things, and when people are ready, they're going to be able to find it, because it's not just for the elitists, it's not just for one particular circle of people. It's going to be available to all, but there needs to be an energetic understanding that exists within the person that will create the miracles and synchronicities for them to be able to find it, because of the level of censorship that exists. And we can like begin to really take down this deep state cabal and begin to replace governments with a completely different structure, which is all about rehabilitation and healing and these advanced technologies, and opening up to our true galactic heritage, which I see is coming. So what I would do is be like, not only cry in his lap, but fist bump and be like, I know, as much as we're going through this weird phase, I'd be like, don't you agree that this is where it's all heading at the end? And that those that have been mostly or deeply affected by the jab or the dark weaponry, mind control, that are ready and willing to heal, that we're going to create a new civilization that holds space for those individuals, while working very closely with Mother Nature to work with the abundance of her, and nurture community, and really protect our kids from this BS. And I think him and I would just be visionary together, not fear-based. I really feel that we inevitably we're going to have to move through this passage. It wasn't like they were going to be like, oh, okay, all right, they're on to us, we're just going to stop. No, it's their survival. They need us as a food source. This is why there's such I mean, they're obsessed. They're not going to just stop. It actually gets worse the more they begin to be taken down. They're going to amp it up, because their survival response to being called out means the end of their reign. And it also means they don't have a food source. So what, they're going to go back to space dust, or they're going to have to heal and begin to reincarnate and begin to hold themselves accountable to what they're carrying, as far as the level of criminal abuses. You know, there's the hidden hand, and, oh, well, we have to create this dark polarity, and then we're hoping to, you know, and there's all that as well. It really kind of depends, because when we look at the pyramid and that kind of hierarchical system of the reptilian mindset, not everybody who has a reptilian influence on them is experiencing it in the same way. But the fact that through media, Hollywood, entertainment industries, medical industries, school systems, educational systems, that the reptilian agenda is being streamed through it to indoctrinate people. They want humans to be as low as they are, as far as their ideologies and their mindset, so that they become their agents to attack and target the star seeds. And this is what I feel is happening with the AI. They're weaponizing humans against those that were going to help people move into the organic ascension timeline and advance themselves. So there's going to be a lot of casualties, but nothing can stop us. Nothing can stop the organic ascension timeline.
Yeah. So that's beautiful. So with your great grandfather, you'd cry, you'd hug him, and you'd say, let's vision this together, and then continue on. So just in closing,
it's already there, I feel, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm so happy for you, Laura. Honestly, it must just give you the greatest faith and the greatest hope, having that personal connection to a beloved that's part of your DNA, your ancestral lineage, your masculine, your feminine, and a person or peoples who are very dominant on this whole timeline on this planet.
Well, that's the thing, is that we're a soul family, and you know, I'm glad I have that close connection, but we're a family. I mean, like, I wasn't born to you, you weren't born to me, but you're my freaking sister and your family. And Eisenhower is kind of like that to so many people. It's like it's on such a greater level. It's what the whole concept of soul family to me is that we're a part of this greater team of light, and we're all family and relatives, and we're going to wake up the masses to realize that they're a part of that family too.
We're brothers and sisters, all of us together, on and off planet. And the frequency of love is the one thing I feel that any dark, nefarious human or any dark, nefarious other being or entity does not have the intelligence or the power to take that from us. So I think the more that we raise in love, and we truly go there and we truly connect to love, that is our power over all any agenda that's been set on this planet.
Absolutely. And that's the override frequency. It can't conceive of these higher dimensions. It lost connection on a DNA level. So it damaged the stargates on the planet, but we can repair it. That's why grid workers are here, but we can repair it within ourselves by not allowing these blockages or mind control programs to rule us. And that's why I love, how you claim sovereignty. Nobody owns me. We have to determine that, because nobody can ultimately compromise us unless we're somewhat in consent. And we know that it involves consent. So even the mandatory stuff, okay, I might not consent. Are you going to try and kill me? Are you going to force it on me? And I disappear and I don't have a physical vessel anymore because of it, because I refuse to give my power away. We're multidimensional. There's no reason to fear death. So we need to really do the inner work, the soul work, so that we can meet and greet the vibration of death with a sense of strength, understanding that death is not an end, it's a transformation. Yeah. And what is there to fear? And they've utilized this ascension window period to stunt the growth of this greater initiation that helps us to thin the veil between life and death, and actually emerge from the cocoon of where we've been in these dark cycles of history to be the true butterfly, our true potential. They're literally like talking people out of their greatness, and convincing them that they're much lesser than they are. And this indoctrination is thousands of years old. And but then they replace it with, oh, but get this degree, get this certificate, be this doctor, be this, we'll prop you up in society with these big paychecks to give you this false sense of, and those things are great. These people are intelligent, but there's something outside of this whole system that people need to begin to tap into to get that spiritual sovereignty back, so that they don't have to fear death. It can be the death of following authority and being obedient just for the sake of, being the good citizen, even though a lot of them know that politics are corrupt, that we hold space for those individuals, and they can get out of their ego because of whatever achievements cause them to say, okay, yeah, I'll take that jab so I can go to the school, or I'll enforce it on others. I just really hope that facade, that veil drops in people, so that they can take those skills and that education that they got from university and begin to mix it and blend it with this greater awakening process, so that we can begin to look to each other and starve that beast that's using them and victimizing them, even though they don't realize it, because their negative ego is masking their ability to see it, if you know what I mean.
From the most educated to the most uneducated in terms of academia, which really neither here nor there when it comes to the love that we all possess as humans, because there's no measurement of how a human can love regardless of their academia, as you know, or their life experience, or in terms of their background. That ability to connect to love, to connect to self, to connect to our brothers and our sisters, that energy is going to I feel is going to really help humanity rise. I really
totally. And dropping the narratives of divide and conquer, whether you're for this or against, where the blending of these dualities is the integration of polarity that births new life. And it's based in love, mutual love and respect, and just honoring and appreciating people's choices without condemning them or hating them or supporting the persecution of them because of that false wokeness instead of authentic truth.
Yeah, totally. Oh, darling, I love you. And I know we've been on for nearly 2 hours, and we've covered so much ground. And I think that we've done your great-grandfather a real beautiful honoring service to bring his story and to bring it to different audiences that have never met you, that have always had these questions about what's it like to be a member of a family of such a global statement of a hierarchical leader, and obviously to highlight some of your work. And so, part 2 next week, we'll go into 9/11, child trafficking, and some of those various entities that exist on our planet that we're very concerned about. And, we're strong women with our own balls that we own, and we're happy to talk about it.
I've had so much fun with you. This is one of my favorite interviews of all time, actually. And you asked me some of questions that nobody really asked me, and I'm grateful that you've held space for me to give people a glimpse of what it's really kind of been, and nice to get kind of personal. And I love everything that you shared, and man, you were cracking me up too. It's just you don't fucking take any. You're just
Why would we? You don't either. You know, and it's really,
No.
we're finding each other. The ballsy birds on the planet, we're all finding each other. And the ballsy men, you know, we're fucking done. And it's okay to say fuck, fuckity fuck, you know, and it's things like that, like, oh, they swore. Oh, that's a level of unintelligence. No, it's not. It's a level of passion. And I mean, if somebody's saying fuck every other word, I can't even handle that. Woo! Okay, a praying mantis just flew on my keyboard.
That's amazing.
Yeah, not really, because they're actually quite aggressive. They can be aggressive.
Right. But
anyway, so reptilians are like,
they bite up the head of their kids, I heard, but on a whole other level. Oh my gosh, praying mantises are pretty wild. Oh my gosh.
Another discussion for another time, Angel. All right, darling. Thank you so much. This has been amazing for me too. And I'll see you next week.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me, Dani.
My pleasure, love. Bye.